Hi, Niel Hiscox, publisher, Canadian auto dealer, here again for a weekly chat with Chuck Seguin. You can tell it's Friday. I decided that I wouldn't take it too close to the wood, given that it's Friday. Chuck, I hope you've had a good week.
Had a great week, actually. It's been it certainly is interesting. It's a little bit like Groundhog Day every day, but it's been a good week.
Good. We've talked an awful lot about response to the pandemic, things dealers are doing, things that are going on in the industry. And I thought this week what we'd do is look a little bit beyond it and touch on some of the things that are going to really impact the selling landscape in terms of incentives, inventory levels, the used car side of things. So let's just dive into that. One thing that's kind of interesting, on the one hand, obviously there's been a massive drop in demand, but at the same time, there's also been a drop in supply. I mean, there's certainly plenty on dealers' lots, but obviously a lot of the factories have been shut down. So it's not like there's a massive mismatch between demand and the supply that's coming. What do you think about all that?
Well, it's an interesting thing, and each brand is slightly different. Most brands stop shipping to dealers in about mid-March, but their inventory continued to come in. So there's a lot of unshipped units awaiting to go to dealers, and most of the brands have been very, very good at not throwing additional inventory at the dealer at this point. But the natives are getting a little restless, and for sure there's going to be pressure to start getting those vehicles turned into cash at the wholesale level. So the manufacturing level is going to take some time. So we're going to go through a bit of a funny period. We've got some sort of, I'm calling this a bit of an artificial time that we're living in right now, where there's lots of money, there's lots of liquidity, there's different things going out. Demand is sporadic depending on the brand that you've got and where you happen to be in the country, and you're not going to see a sustained return to business. Dealers have got enough inventory. On the new vehicle side, a lot of them are really worried about used vehicle values going forward. So there's been a lot of disposition of used vehicles and cutting down on used vehicle inventory. You see the scary headlines out of the U.S. with Hertz going bankrupt and all the off lease stuff. So the supply on the used vehicle side is probably going to be plentiful, which means that it may outstrip demand. So used vehicle prices will come under some pressure from that side alone, and also from the incentive side at the OEs, where the prices of new vehicles are going to come down, where they're going to want to move the metal. That also has a negative impact on pricing in the used vehicle market. So new vehicle prices will likely come down through the incentive pool. Used vehicle prices will come down just out of normal economics, but there's going to be gaps and periods depending on when people no longer get the subsidy, when the fall kicks in, and everybody who thought they had a job doesn't really have a job, so that the unemployment increases. That's going to sort of filter through the system in the fall, which is going to have some pretty negative impacts on consumer sentiment, consumer confidence, and that sort of stuff. So it really is a murky, messy time for the next 6-7 months. It's gonna be quite an interesting, challenging time that I don't think, by and large, the dealers have really ever seen before.
Yeah, it's interesting, the wage subsidy. It certainly, I think, achieved what the government has hoped it would, what we all hoped it would, which has kept a lot more people on payrolls than would have been otherwise. Obviously, it's been extended through to the end of August. The government's hope would be that demand is starting to pick back up, such that by the time the end of August comes around, you can turn that subsidy tap off and a lot of those people will be able to remain in jobs. But there's huge sectors of the economy where that's just not going to be the case. So it's a delaying rather than avoiding the kind of massive unemployment this thing could produce.
Yeah, I'm really
Justin Trudeau phoning you now, presumably.
Yeah, well, he's listening to the conversation.
No.
I'm really scared about the fall and winter. There's a lot of things in order for all of the excitement of opening up to continue. There has to be a steady base, and that steady base is really built on sand. Unemployment is going to be high. Consumer confidence is going to be is really taking a hit now, and will continue to take a hit on the health and safety front. People are going to be unsure whether they're going to be able to make their car payments and things like that. So if they do happen to be in the market for a car, they may be going for a used car rather than a new car. There's a number of industries, restaurants, entertainment, office buildings. There's so much stuff that has to be worked out that will have an impact on behavior. You take downtown cores of pretty well any town, and you've got office towers and different things, even if they're 5-story, 10-story buildings. The whole idea of getting people to work in elevators and things like that, and is going to be very uncomfortable. There's a lot of people who are not going to want to go back in that type of setting, which means that your daily grind of people going out for breakfast and going out for lunch and spending money and doing retail shopping in those areas is going to be cut way back because there aren't going to be the people there.
Yeah.
So it's the sort of residual effect of all of those things that really concern me, because I don't think anybody's really thinking in that way, and it's going to have a big impact on people and their lives and things like that, much more so than we realize. So we're living in a bit of a false sense of security right now, but as soon as that subsidy is taken away, as soon as the CERBs are taken away, all that stuff, people find out they're really not being called back, and that begins to work in. And then where are people going to work? Are malls going to open? Is retail going to open? Are downtown cores going to open? Are people going to want to go back and work in office towers in Toronto, Hamilton, London, Windsor, those places? It's going to have a very lasting impact, and much greater than I think people are being right now anyway are really thinking about, and that concerns me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And on the one hand, I saw a couple of things this week that made me smile, because you have to love the inventiveness people bring. One was a soccer match in Europe where they had ringed the field with giant LCD screens, and they allowed 10,000 people to watch the game via Zoom. But what was interesting is the players could, of course, see all of these. So you imagine a massive tiled Zoom screen. Again, inventive, poor substitute for the original, but it's inventive. But the one that really made me chuckle, for those of us of a certain age, and Chuck, I'll count you in that, will remember the satirical series Get Smart.
Yeah,
And the cones of silence. Well, I saw a photo of a restaurant in Paris that's opened up, and the way they are making it safe is that it was a photo of two people sitting at a table dining, each of them which had a plexiglass around each of them. And I was looking at it with a friend of mine. The first thing they said is, it's the bloody cones of silence. So I said, yeah, I'm not doing that. I mean, so you're right. The challenge is to get back to volume where, you think about on a Friday night if there's a Raptors game in Toronto, all the spill-off economic activity of the people who go for dinner before, go for a drink after. There's no obvious time frame for replacement of that.
No, and it's not just Toronto and the Raptors and the Blue Jays and whatever. It's every town, no matter how big or small. People going out for a beer after work, or offices getting together for a social thing at the local drinking hall, or going out to play 18 holes of golf and staying for dinner or doing something. All of that is going to change, and it's going to hit the car business. The one benefit that we have is that people still need vehicles to get to work. Vehicles are still important, and we're seeing that now. How they're deemed to be essential. The vehicle servicing has been not bad. Retail sales have been sporadic, but there still have been some. Used vehicle sales, there have been some, but no, we're probably running at 50% of where we were a year ago, something like that. But there is still that demand. Um, but as people stay home more, work at home more, travel less, um, it the need for a second vehicle, the need for two new cars, the need for three new cars, that sort of stuff is gonna go by the wayside, and people are gonna find different ways of doing things. We're in a real tidal shift of consumer behavior, and focused on health and safety, but also focused on, hey, I've been home for 60 days. I've still got my job. I'm still working. I'm not spending any money. I haven't put more than 200 kilometers on my car in 60, 90 days. Some of that stuff is going to stick. People are liking some of that. So we're in the midst of new habits being formed, and incentives. One thing, yes, that's going to stimulate people to come to the market, but there have to be people that want to get stimulated to come to the market. And I think consumer demand is going to be something that we're all underestimating, because I'm not sure it's going to be the same way it was before.
I noticed Tesla just put through a price drop, so it's not even an incentive; it's just a flat out price drop.
It's there it is. So and the people that are buying Teslas are of a certain ilk that they can afford it. So to have a price drop really doesn't change the life of a lot of those people. But when you start looking at the announcements of you know vehicle manufacturers, you saw Renault today and Nissan dropping their national or their global production down by a couple million units and whatever, and you start multiplying that across the industry, the new vehicle supply is going to be less. There's concern about the supply chain, so nothing stops a vehicle from production faster than not getting just-in-time parts. And so there's a lot of things that were working very well before that really have to be restarted and reinvented. And not everybody's going to make it. Not everybody that was in the game 6 months ago is going to continue in the game the same way. So none of that stuff is really known yet, but it's going to have an impact. And I'm just concerned that right now we're in this false sense. Everybody thinks, okay, let's put some incentives on vehicles, let's sell lots of cars and whatever. But I think the big tidal wave down the road is when all these deferral payments, everything now becomes real and due. The subsidies are gone. People that thought they were getting jobs back are not getting jobs back, and I think that's gonna be a difficult time, and it's going to impact vehicle prices. It's going to impact the new vehicle market, the used vehicle market, and vehicle servicing, because people will choose not to get their car serviced. They'll put food on the table or pay their rent.
One thing I wanted to see what your thoughts were. There's been a bit written this week on the Trudeau potentially floating the idea of a 4-day work week. So if you have an economy that has that much less work available, you try to spread it amongst more people. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's I thought when I got my first computer way back in the 1970s that I was going to be on a short work week, because that's the way it was going to be. We were all going to have 3-4 day weekends, and productivity was we could do everything so quickly. It becomes the whole idea of a 4-day work week is not bad. It's a question of what compensation are you going to pay for those 4 days. So if I have a lifestyle that's based on X number of dollars of income, and all of a sudden I'm losing 20% of that just because I'm losing a day. Yes, I have a job, but I'm not making the income. I'm not going to be spending the same way. It's going to maybe make an opportunity for people to work, but I think it's going to be more a grinding down of activity as opposed to an increase of activity. I'm not 100% sure that a 4-day work week makes an awful lot of sense.
Yeah, that sort of was my thought. I mean, and at a time when we're facing all of the seismic shifts that we've already touched on, to layer that in as well is, I think, really, really difficult. And the reality is, people can talk about, oh, how nice it would be, but most people I know who are pushing away and trying to move their careers forward have absolutely no interest in a 4-day work week.
Well, no, because most of them are workers 6 or 7.
Yeah.
They're trying to impress the boss, trying to do all that stuff, move up the ladder. They don't want to cut back. They want to do more. They don't want to share their jobs per se, um, or your standard work week becomes a 30-hour work week, and that's your salary, but you're still going to be asked to work 50 or 60 hours, except now you're only going to get paid for 30 as opposed to where you're getting paid for 40 before. So there's a lot has to be worked out for that to make some sense.
It seems to me what you would do is just dramatically increase the shadow economy, where
Exactly.
the amount of work somebody is doing doesn't change. You're just increasing the portion of it that they're not getting paid for.
Yeah, and that's businesses can be pretty creative. Employers can be pretty demanding. Employees often will, if they need the work, they'll go along with what their employers are asking them to do, and work hard. And I'm just not sure that on its own, a 4-day week without a whole bunch of other stuff, makes a ton of sense.
Let's just to start to put a bit of a wrap on this. What are some of the 2 or 3 numbers in terms of economic indicators, beyond the core automotive stuff, that you think people should most be watching over the next few months?
I want people to look at the amount of spending that's taking place by the governments and where it's coming from, and what is it? Is it grants or is it loans? A lot of what the government is doing is debt. It's not, it's repayable at some particular point in time. So it's providing temporary cash flow. And it's usually, if it's not debt, it's usually taxable. So all the people getting that $2,000 a month now are likely having a deferred tax bill that's going to come to light next April, that they're not really planning for, because there's no tax or anything being taken off that. So how's the government paying people, understanding it, and making sure that you're managing your own physical situation or fiscal situation responsibly. Then I would take a look at interest rates, and I would, oddly enough, ignore the stock market, because I don't think that the stock market is giving you any positive reinforcement information as to how the world is really unfolding. And I heard a thing driving over today about, in the U.S. they have all of the thing, they're all called Main Street type of business incentives. And Main Street, that's the big thing. The definition of Main Street in the U.S. is 500 employees or more. how many businesses on your Main Street employ 500 people? So there's a huge disconnect between big business and what's actually happening. So there's so much misinformation. There's so much fake news for all intents and purposes, that really you have to look at your own situation and really understand what your business requires, what you require as an individual, how secure you are, and focus on the things that impact that, as opposed to the big picture, the big rosy picture that anybody can paint, depending on what type of brush they want to paint it with.
Yeah, no question. I think the farther you get from ground level, the more some of the real challenging details get obscured, but they're still there.
Yeah, and if you're a dealer, you're always going to find out that another dealer's doing something else, and they're having great success. That's been part of this industry forever. You know, the cocktail circuit. Look what I'm doing, and you know, I'm not paying tax here. I'm not doing that there. But the reality is, your customers are living in your local market, which you should have a pretty good idea of, and what businesses are surviving, what jobs are going to be lost, what jobs are going to continue, and how's it going to work in your individual market. And really invest your time understanding what the businesses in your area where your customers work, what's happening with them. Because if there's a plant closing down, or if there's a manufacturer that's going from 3 shifts to 1 shift, if you've got construction projects that are on hold, if you've got apartment buildings that are partially built that are not going to be completed, there's going to be a number of signs locally that are going to help you manage your business. And it doesn't matter what something is happening in another community, it has to be based on what's happening in your community to be relevant.
Sounds good. Let's wind it up there. I know you're at the golf course, so you're going to head out and have a socially distanced round of golf after this?
No, actually, I'm in my socially distanced dining room with it seats 80 people, and the only one in here.
You're in my dining room.
And Steve, the chef, is getting ready for takeout dinner, but it's raining, so I won't be golfing today.
All righty. Well, look, have a great weekend. I appreciate the chat as always, and we look forward to talking to you next week.
Okay, talk to you soon. Thanks, Neil.
Niel Hiscox signing off for Canadian Auto Dealer.